Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Horror Podcast. Um, there's no guest with me here this week, um, and that's kind of for a reason because I want to talk a little bit about um, the genre of movie monster or the subgenre of horror um, that I want to get into today. Which is my absolute favorite movie monster, and that is the werewolf. Werewolves are just have always been my favorite movie monster because I find them to be the most frightening um, of the classic movie monsters. And the reason that I find them to be so frightening is because they are unreasonable. Growing up watching the Universal classics, The Mummy, well, it was horror, but I didn't find I didn't find him to be a frightening monster. He was frightening in the sense that he was, I don't conniving, conniving, and he was evil. He was an evil character. Lugosi, um, again, kind of a manipulator, definitely an alpha character, but I didn't find him frightening. The idea that a man could change into a beast, though, and bite your throat out, that's scary to me. That's a monster you can't negotiate with. Um, Dracula could deign to just pass you by, um, so on and so forth. But this guy, there's no negotiating with that. That's just scary, and it's nighttime, and there's howling going on, and people are getting murdered in these very savage ways with this beast that you just can't negotiate with. So yeah, always been my favorite movie monster, and still my favorite movie monster. Although I have to say that I feel that the werewolf doesn't really get his just due. I think a lot of the um, what do you call it? A lot of the fanfare goes to the vampire. So maybe that's just the way life is. I don't know if I necessarily want to go off on a tangent about it. We'll see where this kind of goes. But the werewolf is always kind of second banana, and the movies, they could be comedies, or they could just be, really bad. I still hope, that one day the magnum opus vampire movie, because there is sort of no equivalent in the werewolf subcategory for like a Dracula. You could argue that maybe Lawrence Talbot is that equivalent, the Wolfman. Um, but I'm going to argue that there isn't, um, and that he's kind of a secondary sort of fallback character. The big budgets go to vampires. Um, we've had, I think, an attempt to do something decent with them when the Underworld series came out a while ago. I thought that was pretty cool. That was a pretty good movie. But I mean, again, vampires are just beating werewolves up, or they're killing them, and or they're enslaving them, and yeah. So, the werewolf is kind of the stepchild. So I'm always on the lookout for the next werewolf movie. I'm always on the lookout for something good script, good performance, maybe a big budget. Doesn't necessarily have to be a big budget. It just has to be a good movie. And there are a number of movies out there that can hold their own. I'm thinking more recently of, maybe within the past 20 years of Dog Soldiers. For those of you that have seen it, if you haven't, you should get out there and give it a shot. Any of the Ginger Snaps movies, those are pretty decent werewolf flicks. Um, Especially the one that they set in the 19th century or in colonial times. That's a good uh, werewolf movie. Um, I mean, there's always, Landis's American Werewolf in London. I mean, but, you know, that's probably as close as we ever got to the big budget, big performance werewolf movie, and it was, a comedy. I want the frightening, horrifying werewolf movie. That's what I want. I thought we were going to get it once. About 20 years ago, the French released a movie, and I don't speak French, but essentially it was called The Brotherhood of the Wolf. I thought that that was going to be the movie. Turned out not to be the case. The monster was not a werewolf, although that would have been a perfect setting, and just, that would have been fantastic, but that, just wasn't what the filmmakers had in mind. They still made a pretty good movie. So anytime that there's a werewolf movie out, I'm willing to give it a try. Although at this point in life, I'm not getting my hopes up. Um, I figure, I'm going to have to write the werewolf movie that I want because I'm the only one that, uh, seems to want it or has that image. It's the what movie do I want? I want my movie. So maybe I need to create my own movie. Uh, so that's kind of where I'm at with my favorite werewolf movie. I have a number of them in video collection. Some of them I've owned on VHS and then on DVD, and now I own them on Blu-ray. And if there's another format down the road that I have to switch over, I imagine I'll probably you know buy it again in that format. So be it. When I look on the streaming services, I'm always looking for a werewolf movie, hoping that the horror sections upgrade. Um, it's those ones where they give it a rating of 3 out of 10 or something like that. Those are the kinds of budgets that commonly, um, are assigned to werewolf movies. Um, there was, I guess, Del Toro's performance recently when he rebooted Universal's The Wolfman. Um, I own it. You know, I own it. I own it on Blu-ray. I own the theatrical release. I own the extended release. And every once in a while, I'll pop it in and watch it, and it reminds me a lot of Stoker's Dracula. In that every once in a while, I'll pop it in because I say to myself, maybe this time I'm going to like it. Um, I think when I first saw it, I gave it, and I was talking to another friend of mine who's a fan of horror, and said I'd give it a C plus, something like that. And over time, it hasn't gotten above a C plus. Let's put it that way. But I still enjoy watching it every now and again. What I've come to appreciate from each of these types of movies or the titles that I've picked out um, are bits and pieces. I enjoyed this scene here, or I enjoyed, where this happened there, and, or, this line here, or, it's sort of like that. Um, that's kind of where I'm at with my favorite movie monster. Somewhere between something is better than nothing, but it's not the thing that I want. But I think the most recent entry for me, and if there are other titles out there and you don't think that I know about them, feel free to drop a recommendation, a comment, a DM, anything like that where you think I need to be made aware. I'm happy to listen, but I think the most recent entry into this is This movie right here, I'm holding it up. If you're going to be listening to the audio track, then you won't see it, but I'm holding up a DVD of a movie called Weir, WER, The Legend Reborn. And I think that what happened was I had recently seen a found footage movie called Affliction, which actually turned out to be a vampire flick, which was, I thought, a pretty decent vampire flick. Um, it was an original look at vampirism. And I thought that maybe I saw that, and then somehow, I don't remember exactly how it happened. I was made aware of this movie. So I'm thinking, okay, well, that was pretty good. Let's try this one. And Weir comes from 2013. So it's, we're working on 8 years, but I probably only discovered it within the past 2 years, because I've spent a lot of time overseas in the past 10 years, and so I'm not really up on as many English. I didn't have as much access to English speaking horror flicks as I normally would now that I'm back in the States. So I was very excited about this movie, and the trailer looked legit. It looked interesting. If you get a chance on IMDb or on YouTube, check it out. Weir, WER, 2013. It's directed by a guy named William Brent Beale, if I'm not mistaken. And this William Brent Beale, I hope I'm saying his name correctly, was the director of another movie that I really enjoyed called The Devil Inside, which was a possession movie. That I thought was pretty good. I thought it was a pretty solid possession movie. So I was like, okay, werewolf movie. I saw this guy's other piece of work, and I enjoyed it. Let's give it a shot. Because I was overseas, it's not always available on the streaming services the way U.S. streaming services make certain things available. So I ordered it on Amazon, and I had it shipped to me overseas. Went home, popped it in, and was. It had some good points. It has some bad points. I'm going to get into it a little bit now. It starts out pretty well, where you're seeing what almost seems like it starts off in a found footage kind of way, where a family who's camping. This happens in France. Which I thought was interesting. Modern day France. I can't remember if it was Paris or Nice or Lyon, or I can't remember exactly where in France. But I think there was an American family who was camping in a really peaceful place, and all of a sudden they come under attack, and it just seems, I was like, wow, okay, this is interesting. I think there was a man, a woman, a man, a wife, a child and a dog, and everybody was killed with the exception of the wife. So if you've been following the podcast, I really don't do spoilers, because I always like to presuppose that hopefully someone hasn't seen this movie that I'm talking about, and they'll go out and see it, and then I could have that sort of vicarious thrill if someone comes back to me and says, "Oh, I saw that movie that you were talking about on the podcast," and then maybe there's an opportunity to discuss. But the graphic nature that wasn't, to some extent, was shown, but that was discussed. I was like, okay, this is the werewolf that I want to see. This isn't the tragic, Lawrence Talbot, or was it David from American Werewolf, where he's struggling with this thing that's happening to him. This was a beast, and the premise continues in such a way. It continues because a man is arrested by the police. They determine that this was a murder and not an animal attack. A man is arrested who has a really cool name. The main character, or the antagonist, or the werewolf's name. It's not a secret. It's not like one of those whodunit, who's the werewolf kind of things. His name is Talon Gwynnick. And I was just okay, that's kind of cool, But then it's Europe, so they're not gonna do Lawrence Talbot or Jack Russell or something like that. Talon Gwennick, and I was like, okay. And the guy that they got to play Talon Gwennick was a really impressive and imposing character. The only thing I can think of to off the cuff to compare him to would be Tyler Mane, and the way he portrayed Michael Myers. They just found someone who was very physically imposing and intimidating, and who looked like a werewolf. And you're like, okay, yeah, this guy, yeah, I can see that. This guy could be a werewolf. It's not some mousy dude like David Naughton was in Landis's film. Not, it's not like I'm doing any better than Landis's film. I'm just saying. So what ends up happening? A legal team comes to represent him. A woman and two men. European men, one American woman. And they're trying to represent their client. At the same time, perhaps trying to figure out if he is this thing that they say he is, which is a murderer. It hasn't occurred to them that he might be a monster. So it starts that way. There's some pretty good aftershock, I guess would be a way to describe it, of the crime, when you see some of the damage that has occurred in this crime. You don't know for certain if this guy is a werewolf or not. It's just the person that they've arrested. They do a really good job with his appearance. He's a really imposing guy, but he's also super hairy. And the rationale for the extreme hairiness, and his hands, which are just, they almost don't look like a man's hands. They're just huge and thick and, just, yeah, they don't look like a man's hands. One of the rationale for that is a disease called porphyria. And I had heard something about porphyria before from an X-File, which is my absolute favorite TV show of all time, The X-Files. And there was a less horrific case of porphyria that was just sort of a small part of a story from one of their first seasons. And so porphyria was the way that they're implying that this man is the way that he is. Is porphyria this super rare thing that is actually, causing him to, be the werewolf, which, you as the viewer has to figure out. There's not that much action after that. There is some action, but one of the things, and I hate to get into it right away. One of the things that really kind of threw me about this movie is that a lot of it occurs in the daytime. It's hard to have a werewolf movie in the daytime. But for some reason, that's just the direction that they chose to go in. Middle of the afternoon, a lot of middle of the afternoon stuff. This guy's in jail, so, there's only so much I guess they could do for him at night, but that was the way the script was written. But I felt that takes away a lot of the opportunity to expand, to go as far as they could have gone. It's a werewolf movie. Things happen at night. I mean, that's the mythology. So much of it is in the daytime. There's very little, despite all the positives and the potential that it had, I didn't feel any vibe. There's no feeling, there's no creepiness. There's no, it's not that scary a movie. I mean, it has potential, but it never takes that next step. There is some action in it, but again, it's action. By the time the action starts to occur and things start to break down, and you figure out what direction this is actually going to go, and again, it most of it takes place in the middle of the day, which is not good for a werewolf. Excuse me, a werewolf movie. Um, there's very little CGI, very little makeup. Um, they're sort of relying on this man who plays Talon Gwynick to carry it off, which is a heavy responsibility. But the guy does a passable job. He does a passable job. He's just kind of limited. He's just kind of limited by, I think we don't even get into the nighttime, mode of things until maybe the final 30 minutes of the movie. It's like a 90-minute movie, but the first hour is just almost completely in daytime. There is someone, there's like another male character, to kind of challenge Talon. But what I found out is that, yeah, I didn't really care. I didn't really care about that character. I didn't really care about too many of the characters. I think they could have done more with Talon. Talon Gwynick. I would have liked to see more of Talon Gwynick. I would have liked to have seen more of Talon Gwynick at night, doing werewolfy kind of things. By the time they bring the second person in, you're hoping that, okay, this is going to flip. It's one of those movies, okay, this is going to flip here. They still got a chance. They've still got a chance. They've still got a chance. And it kind of never happens. I don't think it's too much of a leap to say that this second person, the challenge to Talon Gwynick, becomes the second werewolf. And I thought that if you were going to have a movie where someone is, a sort of foil to the main character or to the main wolf, you couldn't do much better than James Spader did in Wolf, where he was sort of the foil for Jack Nicholson. He was fantastic in that. This guy was not James Spader. I'm not an actor. I've never acted at all. But I'm just saying that, it didn't draw me in. None of this really drew me in. And I'm a werewolf fan. Like, I want to like these movies. But it didn't happen for me. In terms of, when we talk about werewolves, you talk about the big change moment. It was too minimalist. Too minimalist. I don't know if there were budget concerns or, really they thought that they could just pull this off, without makeup. But it's a werewolf movie. I mean, there has to be something there. The Talon guy, yeah, okay, he did a pretty passable job. The other guy, yeah, not so much. I wanted to like it. I wanted to like it. I wanted to like it a lot, but um, yeah, I didn't feel that there was that much to work with. So I go on searching for the next big werewolf movie, hoping that one day it will come along. Or, as I said before, perhaps I need to write the great werewolf story myself, because that's the only. It's like buying your own Christmas present. That's the only way you're going to make sure you get exactly what you want. You have to pick it up yourself. So maybe that's in the cards. Maybe that's the way to go. I'm still a fan of werewolves. It's still my favorite monster. Still waiting for the big one. And until then, I guess I'll continue to enjoy the ones that they have released as best I can. Um, yeah. There's definitely going to be more. We're going to be revisiting werewolf movies. I'll say this. I mean, at least it wasn't a romance. Uh, at least they got that part right. It wasn't some sort of romance and flowery, thing where where tears or heartbreak, and all that kind of stuff. It was a monster movie. It was a monster movie. I just think that they sort of hobbled themselves with some of their choices. So we'll just continue to search. It's like the old TV show, In Search of. But that is my review for the first werewolf movie of this podcast. We're going to come back to some better ones, I think, real soon. I don't know. I don't. I could. I don't know anybody in Hollywood, or I don't know any horror screenwriters. I don't know why people don't write the horrific werewolf movie. I don't know. Um, and there are some ones who've, I guess, for their time, they were okay. And I'm thinking more of like a Stephen King Silver Bullet. Pretty scary movie. It's a werewolf movie. I mean, you see the monster, and they're kind of limited. I'm pretty sure that was a guy, in a werewolf suit. So you're a little limited. But that was a good story. It was a really good story. You're just limited by 1985's special effects. I don't think Rick Baker was working on that one. Um, One of these days, I'm going to have to catch the Howling. I know that I just sat here for, almost 30 minutes talking about werewolves, and then I tell you I haven't seen the Howling. Um, there's something I've read that book um, when it first came out by Gary Brander. Gary Brander wrote the Howling, and I think he wrote the Howling 2 and 3, and um, I just never got around to it. And if I'm not, maybe I did, and I just thought at the time it was campy. They didn't really translate what was happening in the book to the movie. They made a very different movie. But perhaps for the purposes of the special effects, and I think that those were actually vampires. Excuse me, werewolves. They've got me doing it now. Jeez. Maybe those were real movie monsters. I think that was Rick Baker again. So I'll have to get around to it one of these days. But there are still a lot of good werewolf movies that I own, and a couple that you can access um, on the streaming services. And yeah, I'll have to revisit this again. But for this movie, Weir, um, I'm going to say that if you have a chance to see it, give it a shot. You're rarely going to get me to say that you shouldn't see a movie at all. Like don't see this movie, for God's sakes. I won't do that. There are a few, and I've been talking to some friends and people that I'm going to have on the podcast in the coming weeks, where we're going to say, for God's sake, don't see this movie, because outside of horror, we're probably going to touch on some sci-fi, and so there's a huge universe out there. But for this movie, check it out. Maybe you'll enjoy it. I find that often if if I see a movie that someone else has bagged, like just said, like, this movie sucks, like, don't see it, for God's sake, save your 90 minutes and your $10 or however much it costs to go to the movies nowadays. Just don't do it. And I end up going to see that movie. I end up thoroughly enjoying it because my expectations have been so I don't know what the word is. My expectations have been so lowered, for lack of a better term, that I just end up really enjoying the movie. So See for yourself. Don't take my word for it. You might see it and say, hey, that's not a bad movie. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. No big deal. That's cool. Weir, from the director of The Devil Inside, The Legend Reborn, Talon Gwynnick. I think that's it for today. I wanted to start talking about werewolves. I don't know that I'm going to go on a werewolf tear, like, weeks after a week of werewolves. But we're definitely going to revisit them. And, yeah. Okay. So I think that's it for now. I hope you do enjoy some horror this month. I don't know that you're going to overlap them with romance. But if you do, that's fine too. To each their own. Everybody's got to, we all got to breathe. And, okay. I guess I'll see you next week. I think we've got something pretty good lined up. And, all right, you take care and try not to scare yourselves.